cheap solar power, batteries, and electric vehicles are changing the transport and energy sector as we know. I bring in guests to this podcast who will help you with their ideas to navigate this energy transition. By the way, this episode is also available as a video on our YouTube channel. Just search Energypreneurs. Thank you for joining. Hi, good evening from Manila. I think you're in Hawaii, right?
Yeah, but I did spend about 15 years in Hawaii.
Where are you right now?
But yeah, my name's Clint O'Neill and Northern Colorado, Loveland, about an hour north of Denver. So I've been in renewables for 16 years. I actually got started in the industry in Hawaii out of college, started a finance that turned into a full developer EPC company. We grew that out to one of the largest developers in the state. Doing primarily C&I rooftop. And then we also started a residential division. And we were always very keen on the tech behind the scenes of traditional grid-tied solar, the revenue grade metering, advanced controls, advanced metering. And that positioned us well to work with the utility there and be an island grid that laid out a lot of opportunities for us to learn about emerging markets like energy storage when that market really opened up. I bounced around a little bit. I've done some work for a small kind of boutique solar module manufacturer and a couple other C&I outfits. And most recently, which I think is a really exciting turn in the industry for DERs, is really working directly with utilities, but also with the EPCs, developers, and tech companies on the grid edge, looking at everything we've built over the last 2 decades and looking to solve those problems and challenges to put those assets to work to modernize the grid, both with new deployments, bigger, faster, stronger, as well as powering and revisiting the old assets that we've, as an industry, have all worked so hard to get out there and deploy, whether it's on businesses, facilities, or homes. So I've been working on lots of due diligence and several procurements in the virtual power plant world. So those emerging techs, whether it's aggregators, DERM providers, and different vertical models that are allowing kind of network capacity products for utilities to start to use these DERs, whether it's demand response, call-in events for energy storage, and so forth.
Do you want to take us through maybe one of such projects? Because you mentioned that the past project with an efficiency may have been just 17%. Now you're upgrading, adding batteries, doing a lot of things, VPP options, because a lot of people, what you're talking about is talking from the future back, because a lot of people, many countries, still rooftop solar just started to happen. So for them, listening to someone who did these early days in Hawaii, and Hawaii, as everyone knows, you walk through, every roof has a rooftop, a solar almost.
Yeah, so it's been fascinating. So I guess a journey or an example was back, and that's still happening now in Northern Colorado. We're very much a grid-tied solar market, but the tech is catching up and the rate structures are almost leapfrogging themselves as far as like net metering or even time of use rates, which directly impact the industry. So the tech is there. The tech is moving faster than the traditional kind of curve that a solar contractor traditionally would go through. So using the Hawaii example, we transitioned from traditional grid-tied solar, where we're in a net metering environment, to essentially a non-export environment because of the utility changes. So net metering went away overnight, and it really put the industry into sort of a chaotic or tailspin scenario where there were hundreds of solar contractors doing grid-tied solar. And now everybody had to figure out how to build a system that still was economically feasible for both the business customer and utility, but also choosing and partnering with the right tech to make sure that we designed and engineered that product so it did not export to the grid. So there had to be intelligence there at the manufacturer level to make those systems operate correctly through advanced metering to essentially throttle themselves down and continue to operate when they were getting close to the point of exporting to the grid.
No. Can you please take us through? Because not everyone may be aware of what happened in Hawaii. Are you talking about a situation where the regulation changed and now you are not able to sell your rooftop solar to the grid, or maybe price is very low, or it was triggering some sort of additional charge? Can you maybe explain a bit more?
Yeah. So the local utility sunsetted their net metering program in whole. And when that happened, they were no longer accepting export at all. So if you did export, you were not going to get any credit at all. So that happened for a period of time while they also in tandem worked with some key developers and manufacturers to create really worldwide leading compliances for the manufacturing tech to enable limited export or non-export products and systems that could interact with the grid, so that they could find new net metering programs or grid service programs. So there was a period of time where there was zero net metering, so meaning nobody was exporting to the grid any longer, and if they were not getting compensated for it. And so it became very important on the industry side to size those systems and design and engineer those systems correctly so that you wouldn't export the power. One, you would get a nasty gram for the utility because you're not supposed to be exporting power onto that line because of their rules and regulations from a grid operator standpoint. They didn't want to damage any equipment because of overloaded circuits, essentially. And on the flip side, if there wasn't a mechanical or electrical issue on the grid operator standpoint, you weren't getting compensated for it. So it really became that much more important to design these systems appropriately for that environment. And that ushered in the transition to energy storage, right? So then the attachment rate from traditional grid tied solar really switched to pretty much 100% attachment rate. The solve for the problem was energy storage or curtailment. So energy storage really took off and several batteries came to the market, several manufacturers came to the market, and that's where we dug in and evaluated and chose our partners to support our customers and continue deployment and the design, installation, and sales of solar in that state.
So if you are unable to sell back to the grid, still all you're able to do not take from grid at all. So you take your daytime solar, spread it so that you have nighttime, and you just keeping grid as an option, right? Is that what everyone is doing?
Yeah, so you can still buy from the grid. You just can't sell it back to the grid. Yep. So exactly. So we would be maximizing their rooftop and that storage to maximize self-consumption. And that's really where we started to see the battery attachment rate take off. We would maximize that amount of storage with the amount of generation we put on site. And the goal being that home would be purely self-consuming for 70+% of the time, assuming they had adequate roof space. And then they would just buy from the grid when they weren't able to cover their own consumption.
This is very interesting because Australia right now, I think I interviewed someone a couple of weeks back, and he was saying the attachment rate is 140% in Australia right now because of the huge multi-billion-dollar subsidies for batteries that the government has thrown in. So people are just going for 50 kilowatt hour battery. No one is doing solar without batteries. And then, of course, everyone else who already had solar adding batteries. But I think this sort of regulatory framework will ever come in Australia. Maybe feed-in tariff can become zero, which almost getting there along those lines, but not that you cannot export back because of system constraints. It's very interesting.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And they did that because of grid constraints and grid upgrade, grid operation issues, being an isolated, smaller grid. And during that period, lots of storage was introduced to the system, right, on the behind the meter. And they evolved and they started opening programs that would allow export. So whether it was limited export or grid services, like a battery program where some of that capacity was dedicated to the utility, which started to become first of their kind. And it really started to inform other markets and build out the models for what we're talking about. And what I've been digging into over the last handful of years is some of those kind of foundational pivots that happened in Hawaii that the manufacturers had their eye on. And they knew that, okay, if we can be compliant in Hawaii in a non-export environment, and then
Mhm.
all have our piece of equipment transition back into a grid service or an export environment and be that nimble with our power electronics, then we're going to be able to do any model anywhere in the world, regardless of the rules and regulations, whether it's rates or whether it's grid operation. So California, obviously, the hotspot, and they're all in on piloting and testing and now dispatching some of these grid service scenarios that were very similar to the way that we tested them back in Hawaii. And an industry as a whole, especially utilities, all have their eye on virtual power plant, all the way down from the grid edge to the circuit level, substation level, distribution operating parameters to help with congestion or circuit penetration, and then all the way up to the energy market. So to be able to dispatch and make a grid call on these devices for maybe day ahead market or something like that.
That had been my thinking every time I went to Hawaii, saying so much solar. Philippines, where I'm right now, has 7,000 islands, but no solar at all. Lot of
Right.
distributed diesel gensets in remote
Mhm.
areas, and of course, island to island, inter-island connectivities are there in some cases. But yeah, it intrigues me that solar did not take off that much. But now electric vehicle is happening in a significant way. So what is the situation in either Hawaii and Colorado in terms of electric vehicles? Because the batteries on wheels also taking off, no?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's interesting that the two industries have intersected at the point in which they did, I think. So now that the inverter based resources have proven their use and sophistication to be bidirectional with the grid and provide these services in a meaningful way, the electric vehicles aren't that dissimilar. And the manufacturers understand that. And I think a lot of that inverter based technology is inherent to the design of the charging equipment as well as the vehicle itself. So they've intersected in certain markets to really support one another. So a rolling battery isn't very different at all than a stationary battery. When you look at markets that have a high attachment rate of residential energy storage or commercial storage, the markets are being looked at, and there are manufacturers that are testing out that bidirectional EV charging infrastructure. So when that is put in place, when the battery car is there, it essentially acts like a home battery, and it can support load. It can live behind the meter, but then it can also export its power to provide grid services similar to a home battery you'd put on your wall.
Except it came free with the car and it is five
Yeah.
size of the batteries that you're going to buy, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And there's that integration play from most of the main manufacturers are doing it. So the big three auto manufacturers, as well as most of the other EV startups, where they have their home kit, right? So they have that charger that when you purchase your vehicle, certain vehicles have a home integration kit. So it's not just a simple charger. It will allow that to do vehicle to home. And that's the first step into this, which is a very similar product to what you would see with an Enphase or a Tesla for a home battery. And that allows that vehicle, to your point, you just purchased a new vehicle. That vehicle has a battery in it. That battery is probably 5 times the size of a solar battery that you would have bought. So you can put it to use when you're not using your vehicle. It's great for self-consumption and optimize that plan of like, how am I going to the most out of my rooftop solar system? I'm going to buy a car battery instead of a home and keep that balancing going, right? And add that extra storage and have that extra resiliency, especially in markets that have reliability problems. And the utilities have their eyes on these resources of kind of transportation, follow a lot of grid infrastructure. So as we start to see more public charging and fleet charging, those also become grid assets from an infrastructure basis. So the utilities can start to see these chargers, if they are able to turn on or deploy a V to G scenario, now our main transportation viaducts become our main electric connection points where we can start to balance the grid and take advantage of grid services from all of these batteries in an orchestrated fashion.
Yeah. I'm just visualizing one thing. I'm sure you remember those old drive-in movie theaters, right? You had to take a speaker, maybe you're too young to take a
Yeah,
speaker.
no,
You have to put on a door and that's how you would listen. And then you have the movie. I'm just thinking now you can easily get 100, which is a matrix of 10 by 10 cars to come in. Hey, watch a movie. And you connect to this bi-directional thing and it's a 1 megawatt power station picking up
yeah,
maybe evening peak somewhere. You provide God knows whatever you need to provide to this 100 guy free pizza and whatnot, but you are getting a summer evening peak. You can easily address that.
yeah. And that's exactly the scenario, right? The road trip scenario also is the same. So it's like the drive-in movie theater. You bring all these vehicles together, you aggregate them, you dispatch them. Now you have real capacity. It could be megawatts.
Yeah.
And it solves a lot of problems. And then you can also distribute that out with the home idea. So you have essentially V cul-de-sacs here and there that you're avoiding upgrades upstream for a whole neighborhood because the neighborhood has enough EV penetration. And if they've all enrolled in that program, they can all manage that charging, whether it's charge or discharge. They'll get compensated for that, and the grid will be able to be operated more efficiently in a balanced manner. And then the traditional American road stop for road trips, it won't just be a rest stop with a restroom anymore. It'll be similar to the way you described the theater. These vehicles will be able to come in and out, and they might have stationary storage and on-site generation incorporated in with them. So now we have this buffer full kind of DER scenario where you pull off your electric vehicle or it pulls itself off to get its charge and you take your rest, you grab your bite to eat. If you didn't need the power, the car will go ahead and discharge. If you need it, it'll charge. And that's the orchestration of managed charging. And then the discharge would be the vehicle grid.
Yeah. Then, and this orchestration gets even more interesting when the battery size in a car increases from 65 today to say 200 kilowatt hour quite
Yeah.
easily the
Yeah.
way
And
the world is headed with, right? And then suddenly your consumption is not going to increase because efficiency will make it you consume less and you have this tiny place to heat or cool it down. So you're not going to use much.
right.
If you're carrying a 200 kilowatt hour each car, that's a lot of electricity. That's almost 10 times the average Australian home, right? And the
Yes.
consumption, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's an enormous amount of electricity, and that resource is going to be spread all over the place. So I think one of the challenges, our batteries rolling around, one of the challenges is getting that out of the vehicle fast enough.
So I think these parks that you are mentioning, it could be a bi-directional charge. The whole definition of a rest stop will change once we have large batteries in a car.
Yeah, yeah. And it opens up a whole bunch of opportunities for the consumer and the utility, right? So now we're not just talking about energy, right? With the amount of resource that these batteries are holding, I think that it's starting to take the similar path of what energy storage has on a home, right? So if you're putting a solar battery in, you have some capacity constraints, right? So you have a home and it's set up for anywhere from 100 to 200 amps of service. So you're essentially limited there. Like behind the meter, you can continue to build, you continue to power whatever you're powering. But when you want to start to serve the grid, there's some real challenges with the throughput, right? So if you're needing to support megawatt grid event at a charging station, all of these electric vehicles are going to be challenged with getting that power out of the vehicle fast enough in terms of kW. So I think that's where we're going to see a lot of opportunity for the charging tech and the manufacturers, that they're going to start to work towards, and I'm sure you see it in the news, some very high voltage, fast charging solutions and the charging protocols to allow those batteries to charge or discharge at a much higher rate so they can get that throughput out onto the grid.
Yeah, I mean, the way the electric vehicle is sneaking into this industry, I can see similarities and how mobile phone got into the home. People say, yeah, okay. Just it needs battery, a tiny one, then it becomes three, and suddenly people forgot, oh, we have something called landline. And then no more landlines. It's just vanished. So I think the relevance, there is a very high risk, the relevance of the grid at the distribution network level might change dramatically. I don't know.
Yeah, I think so. I think that the traditional way of looking at distribution grids is being turned upside down in certain scenarios where you've got, it's not a one-way street anymore. It's like a one-to-many solution. And when you add in, and that's just solar and batteries that are stationary. But when you start adding in the vehicles, now it's one to many, but the many are moving targets, right? So these batteries are driving around, and some of them may have patterns and some of them may have predictability and modeling of when that resource is going to be available, either through an agreement. So you agree to have that battery available in a fleet charging scenario. So those are always essentially going to be there at a certain period of time. But then for the average consumer, you just hop in your car and you go, and some things are planned and some things are unplanned. So the technology is going to be imperative on understanding when that resource is dispatchable and when it's not, and making sure that the customer experience is also protected on making sure that their vehicle is accessible to them as well, even during a grid event.
How does that, you throw in a cat in that makes AI, right? Suddenly, human don't have to optimize. Optimization definition gets changed dramatically, no? So you have any thoughts as to how that might pan out, or just some
Yeah,
idea?
yeah. It's going to be highly leveraging, right? That the AI native solutions are going to be highly leveraged, right? Because that is the tech that is enabling the orchestration to happen at real time, fast enough to get this orchestration to be a real product, right? So with the advent of AI and the speed at which it's able to accurately exchange information is exactly what this tech is needing, right? When we think about the one-to-many scenario of control room that's trying to operate a grid and many assets, some are moving, some are stationary. The compute is going to be able to handle those scenarios and iterate fast enough real time instead of needing to take what we would call like a traditional break or a historical review to plan an event. The events will essentially plan themselves to keep things balanced.
Yeah, like I've been to mini control centers, dispatch centers, maybe, I don't know, 20 different countries, seen from a very basic call and switch it on to SCADA systems, but they are only controlling maybe 20 power station, X number of substations, and that's it. But now you just imagine you have a literally millions of cars, homes, and all direction. Of course,
Yeah,
optimization, a very different ball game, right?
absolutely. It is humanly impossible. And so the intersection of the technology and the need to orchestrate this is happening. And it is millions, if not hundreds of millions of devices that can all orchestrate into this ecosystem. So some of them might be batteries, but we're also talking about traditional demand response devices that can just be brought into the same ecosystem and reduce load as well. And that can all be part of the same equation, right? So think about heat pumps and HVAC equipment, smart thermostats, smart loads for energy efficiency. And when you're able to train that model to take advantage of those resources, and you can build that customer trust to allow that opt-in so that we can control those devices, now the model starts to work. And I think we've proven it in the simplest kind of stages through demand side management and demand response. And now it's a matter of taking them all and putting them in the same kind of environment and doing those calls concurrently. So we're not just asking the battery to dispatch its power, we're also asking the house to shed its loads. And we're also asking the EV charging station down the street to charge, but maybe the one on the other side of town is going to discharge. And if all that happens at the same time, we have that kind of full balanced automation running behind the scenes. And that control center is now looking at a node instead of adding another power station. You're adding a VPP node. Everything behind the VPP node is what we're talking about. So it's an aggregated ecosystem of DER, which is the kind of a living, breathing power station that has much more sophistication than a centralized dispatch from like a peaker plant or a coal plant.
Yeah, but having said that, I'm sure there will be a lot of people who will just say electricity is so cheap because solar is almost becoming a couple of cents a kilowatt hour. If you look forward, it's a 10 cents a watt, 10 cents a watt peak panel. So a lot of people might just say, you know what? I don't trust AI. I just want to ring fence. I just want to island myself and stay put. I don't want to participate. I'm sure there will be some. Do you have any views on that aspect? Yes, it would be nice to optimize, synchronize everything orchestrating, optimize, but as electricity becomes cheaper and cheaper, so you might just, yeah, it's okay. I don't want to be. A lot of people might just say, no.
Yeah. And I think we're already there. I can appreciate that mentality as well and that need. And I think that they're able to coexist. And I think that those systems are already there and there are certain markets and that decision driven economically, but it's also driven because energy can be very personal. So on your experience. So if you have less than desirable experiences with power outages or situations where the power utility just hasn't been able to support your needs, all of the technology that we're talking about is essentially, it was built to do this behind the meter natively. So deploying that and having that option for the consumer, and this would be from the private side, not the utility side, as like an EPC or a developer, you can put that system in place today. And the hardest part today with the technology is the economics. So as utility or electricity prices get higher, that grid as a backup type of scenario where you can just flip the switch and say goodbye to the utility and go grid invisible, you can do it. And the technology is there. There's plenty of markets that are doing that, but it's mostly driven on economics to get those in place. And it becomes more advantageous and affordable for the customer, the higher the electricity rate is, because there's a trade-off and a payback there. But as costs drop down with the abundance of solar, if that rate pressure goes away, we might see it being a little less compelling for people to do grid defection because electricity is affordable. If reliability goes up, then grid participation might go up with it. If we still continue to have issues with reliability, we might see islanding solutions or being able to use grid as backup and go off grid uptick. So I think we're going to see both, especially with the state of our electrical infrastructure at scale. There are lots of areas that need vast amounts of improvement, grid modernization, faster than we're going to be able to keep up with. So I think there's going to be a crunch where we're going to see areas across the nation that have increased outages. And we're going to see participation go up on behind the meter solutions for people to take control of their own power in those areas, where areas that have more reliable power, we're going to see higher participation in grid services. So they're going to adopt technologies and participate in the grid because they're able to. And I think it's very market specific, right? So I think it depends on your scenario. And the great thing about these technologies, though, is that they're able to solve the problem in both scenarios. So they're able to support the user, whether it's the utility or whether it's the customer. And it's the same solution, different setting.
So what else you do for fun? I see work has been a lot of fun for you with the way the DER, the whole distributed energy resources and everything going on. But what else you do? You are in Colorado, right? It's a lovely part of the world, no?
Yeah. So in Northern Colorado, got two young daughters, a 10 and an 8-year-old. So we're getting in the swing of back to school. And yeah, I was born and raised here. So love the outdoors. I've been back in Colorado for about 4 years. And yeah, it's great. So just raising the kiddos and enjoying the last few weeks of summer here. And yeah, it's a great, beautiful place. And especially for solar and batteries.
So what do you tell your daughters? Like, I mean, we were all discussing 2020, 2030. So they're all at the doorstep right now. What else do you think innovation wise we will see in the next 5 years coming up? You have any vision?
I think the actual orchestration of what we're talking about is going to come to a head. So I think that's the innovation that I'm excited to see. Getting more out of planning and more into implementation is going to be interesting. I'm excited to see the innovation of the actual services and the programs popping up on your phone as, would you like to participate? And having those customers get to have those experiences. That's the innovation that I'm looking forward to seeing, is watching it happen in practice. And then the other thing that I'm excited about is more of a challenge. And I think that it's continuing to work on just deployment, right? So looking at my specific area, Northern Colorado region, we have very affordable electric prices. Deployment is sluggish because there's not necessarily an economic compelling reason to electrify a whole home or put really large on-site generation like rooftop solar. And so continuing to work and explore opportunities on deploying these devices at scale and doing it at a quick enough pace that we can get to that level of, okay, now we have a base line of devices that we can orchestrate and that we can turn into a virtual power plant. It takes scale, right? There's a lot of work to be done to deploy devices in a mindful way to make sure that they're being put out there with, of course, first with the customer's best interest in mind, to make sure that those products are going to live behind the meter, do what they're promised to do, and be waiting for the opportunity to support their neighbors in their community.
Yeah, these products are getting designed for the global market, and then you have to fine tune. But you mentioned the electricity price is very cheap. I'm just intrigued. In cents per kilowatt hour, what's the average price you pay?
Yeah, I think our residential rate, we have a seasonal, so it has a summer and a winter, but it's around 9 cents. And then it's a few cents higher for commercial. So I think as we start to see that blended rate get closer to the 13 to 15 cents per kilowatt hour, that's where we're going to start to see the bigger adoption, because it's going to come closer to we're continually driving down our deployment costs for solar and storage. That's going to intersect with our kilowatt hour pricing here in the next, I would say, 3 or 4 years with our planned rate increases. And so, yeah, I think it's going to start to see an uptick, but it's also continuing to work on just market viability and adoption from the community perspective of, what do these devices do? Why do people use solar? Why do people use batteries? If you're thinking about electric vehicles, let's start to educate the community on why these other technologies are important as well.
Yeah, then absolutely, because somehow it's all coming as a whole ecosystem, no? It's quite fascinating. It's all coming together. It looks like that everybody, it was thought through, but it not. V2G, people say, no, we don't care. And then now, as you started the bi-directional charging, thinking, actually, yeah, those market, which has a wholesale power market, it just makes sense now. Right?
Yeah.
All this thinking.
Yeah. Absolutely. We've got a tremendous opportunity to have a tremendous resource play at all levels in the grid, which has never happened before. So it's very exciting times.
Yes, absolutely. Because the electricity is to be like water. You have a tank somewhere, it goes, everybody's house, gravity flow, always one direction. Now it's going to be very different. Is there anything else I could have asked you? Thank you for your time.
No, I think that we covered a lot. Thank you very much for having me. And this was a great conversation, and look forward to talking with you again and continuing to be connected.
Yeah, let's keep in touch. Thank you so much. I like your shirt, by the way.
Thank you.
Has it got any fish or something, or mountain?
Some palm trees, some flowers. Yeah.
Very nice. Thank you. Thank you. Have a nice day.
Yeah. Thanks, Ariel. Bye.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Energypreneurs. If you enjoy this, don't forget the full video is on YouTube. Just search Energypreneurs. Thank you. See you next time.